So, hello and good morning to everyone. My name's Ian Gerard. This is the Ultima monthly licensing webinar for today, the 16th of March. I hope everybody can see my slides. I think we do still have some people joining, but as always, this session, this webinar is going to be recorded. So please let me know if you have any questions kind of following up on this. So the idea is that this session this morning is going to last about half an hour to 40 minutes. There will be time for questions as always. Feel free to pop the questions down in the IM or and we'll kind of cover them off as we go, or I will cover them off at the end. As always, it is going to be a relatively high-level introduction to the topics we're going to be looking at today, with the idea being that these are the general discussion points and the important points to consider. But of course, every customer's unique scenario is going to be individual to them. So when it actually comes to working this stuff out for yourself, 100%, contact myself, contact your Ultima account team, or come directly to myself or your licensing team member or anyone else. But we can kind of all help, and you're really going to be able to really understand this once we start making it a little more bespoke for yourselves. I've got my colleague Matt Beale with me today as well, who'll be covering off a later part of the webinar. But ultimately, what we're going to be looking at is what's going on in regards to the Microsoft agreements, and then a particular focus on the CSP and kind of explaining how the licensing works under a CSP type agreement, and cover off most of the questions that I've certainly been getting the last 6 months, 3 to 6 months. We'll then cover off a little bit more around how Ultima specifically have approached these challenges and what our service is, and then ultimately we'll look at some of the really cool stuff and new products that we're actually creating in this space, and we'll hear from Matt as well around that, and some really cool stuff. Then it will be the final piece, which is just kind of covering off those other Microsoft news and updates, all relating to Microsoft commercial, Microsoft licensing, price increase, new products, things like that. And like I said, at the end there will be an opportunity for everyone to ask questions as well. So I hope that's good, but the recording will be made available as I mentioned already. Now I do like this slide as a good one to start off with, even if it is it's a little convoluted, but it does set the scene quite well. On the left hand side, this is a Microsoft slide, but on the left hand side you can see the current approach Microsoft had to licensing their commercial agreements, whether you were buying Azure, whether you were buying Office 365, whether you were buying a copy of Project Standard Office 2010. You could buy this through an enterprise agreement, a Select Plus, MPSA, Open, Web Direct. Some of these would be delivered directly from Microsoft. Some would come through like a LAR, some would come through a distributor and then a reseller, and some of them via Web Direct. You can pay directly on the credit card. So certainly over time, Microsoft have this proliferation of all these agreements that it just makes it all a little bit convoluted, and many, the vast majority of customers therefore have multiple renewal dates. They have perpetual licenses over here, subscription licenses over there. As we all know, the move towards the kind of OPEX model, many of these traditional legacy methods are not really going to be suitable for a kind of modern, flexible work environment. And Microsoft acknowledged this, so they've effectively moved away from kind of having 10 odd agreements, and moving forwards in the future, we are going to be effectively looking at 3 purchasing options for you as a customer. And we're already kind of there, and in actual fact, you kind of maybe dip in and out of all 3, but it's effectively Microsoft-led, partner-led, or self-service, which is a very interesting way of saying Microsoft assisted, Microsoft-led, which would be the enterprise agreement, the partner-led, which would be CSP, or the self-service, which would be get your credit card out and go and buy it from the website. Now, yes, there are still open agreements, and yes, there is still Select Plus and MPSA, but this is effectively where we're going, and this is really what you should kind of concentrate on, and which one of those 3 categories is going to provide the most value to you, or as I can tell you now, what 90% of organizations, it's a little bit of a mix. Different scenarios can kind of fulfill different elements, but I suppose it's important to understand the CSP and what that offers, as opposed to what potentially, buying on a credit card, paying on a credit card is fine. You get the price you've taken and the license, and you can walk away. The enterprise agreement, yes, you'll be over 500 users. It's a 3-year term. and all of that. But what I really want to talk about is the CSP option. CSP basically stands for Cloud Solution Provider, and it provides a whole host of different support and services and value and all those kind of buzzwords. It's sold by lots of different partners. Ultima, we are a CSP provider, and there's lots of other CSP providers out there. And now really, yes, of course, it's a competitive market. So point number 4 around pricing is important. It's licensing, it's fulfillment. The price point, the black and white, is always going to be crucial. But really, the key is trying to choose the right partner or choose the right purchasing procurement method is actually going to add the most value to you as an organization. And that's kind of how CSP has been built. Yeah, of course, competitive pricing, but ultimately the main benefit is its flexibility. And by that, we simply mean you don't have to commit to any particular, with Ultima CSP, you don't have to commit to any particular agreement term. You don't have to sign up for 6 months, for a 1 year. You can sign up for just 1 month if that's all that is needed. You don't have to sign up for any particular suites. You don't have to necessarily go for the full E3 if it's just Exchange Online that you're looking for. Actually, if you just want to consume some Azure services, you can just buy it for Azure. If you want to set up multiple tenancies, you can do that. If you want to have multiple subscriptions, you can do that. It's really straightforward. You have a self-service portal. So almost instantaneously, you can assign the licenses, or as your dedicated support team, we could do that for you. And this is all effectively done on a monthly billing model. So it's effectively pay as you go. And you're only really paying for what you consume. It's a consumption-based model. And I mentioned around that support, having that 24/7 dedicated support is absolutely crucial. So that whichever partner, with the Ultima CSP, the fact of the matter is we've got the 13 times gold accreditations within our technical support center, and we have a Microsoft Premier support contract in the background, but we're kind of answering 99.4% of all queries aren't having to do that. So you really do get that local dedicated support. The pricing I've mentioned already. And yeah, around the cloud expertise, it's just around making sure that we are proactively monitoring what you're doing within the CSP and actually applying our expertise around that. So if you're doing some things or perhaps buying an incorrect license, or there's a slightly smarter way of doing it, almost on a monthly basis, we can see what you're consuming, see how if we can improve that optimization piece to basically add more value to you as a customer. So really, this CSP is a monthly, it's a flexible offering, it's competitively priced, but you as an organizer, you as a customer are going to be choosing really your CSP provider. Hopefully that's Ultima, but it's going to be based around the additional value. And for us, for Ultima, we've really laid it down with our consumption-based model. It's actually optimizing that usage, whether that's with Office 365 or whether that's with Azure. And I don't want to denigrate the other elements, because I suppose if I was to bring out the 3 core benefits of CSP, what most customers like about it, there's no upfront costs. If you've got the enterprise agreement, you're having to kind of sign a 3-year term and pay that full year up front. With the CSP, you're basically paying, you're buying as you go, you're paying as you consume. So there's no upfront costs, and you're only effectively paying for what you use. And then at the end of the month, if we can proactively look at what you're consuming, and then especially within Office 365 or within Azure, which we'll come on to in a little more detail in a moment, then you're going to get more value from that. You're going to be very confident that you're on a very optimized model. The key then actually becomes more around management. Is, well, actually, do you really want to be doing this every single month? It kind of depends on the profile of your user, the amount you're consuming. Most fit into potentially like a quarterly model, whereas you can set an individual user, perhaps they've been inactive for 60 or 90 days, you can then start proactively reharvesting or downgrading that license, allocating it to someone who is going to get use out of it. That's the flexibility. Then if that person comes back and needs to bring back those services, with a couple of clicks of the mouse within your portal telling us to do it, that user's straight back to getting their license back. So that kind of flexibility around the billing as well, both with the consumption around the billing, because it all gets prorated per day, is a real core benefit of the CSP. But that's CSP in general. Then you're looking about partners. It's like, well, who's going to add the most value? Who's going to add the most support? And it's really around getting the most value is what you should be considering when you're, when you move into CSP potentially. First things first, you need to leverage your current license position. So you do need to identify those perpetual licenses where you could actually save in your cloud strategy. I could be talking about you've been buying Office 2019 on premise with active software assurance, and now you want to leverage that investment move into the cloud. Or it could be you've got a SQL Server Enterprise with active software assurance and you want to use the hybrid use benefit. That's also the case with Windows Server as well. So actually our cloud success teams and the cloud success managers that we have at Ultima does look at that holistic view of all of your software investments. Yeah, absolutely, making sure you're remaining compliant, but actually to leverage those savings as you kind of move towards the cloud. And we help with that. And certainly in certain cases, certain spend, let's be honest, if you're an Azure customer and you're spending in excess of £500,000 a year, then there's a conversation to be had with Microsoft around negotiating better pricing. Microsoft aren't really going to give you a discount on Azure. Those services in Azure aren't going to be discounted like a list price level. But we can, but because Microsoft don't have the framework necessarily to do that. But what they can do is they can take that spend, take that commitment you've made to the Microsoft strategy and say, well, we will be able to apply potentially either some discounting on your Office 365 licensing or some fast track funding or some enterprise investment funding. But this is what I mean. This is what our cloud success team do, is just making sure we are considering and leveraging all of your investment across that full Microsoft portfolio to make sure that you're actually paying the lowest cost, getting the most value. And then we've also got our various bolt-ons, which just free up your spend and free up, in theory, your time to be doing some even more stuff. And I want to touch upon that now in a little bit more detail before I do hand over to Matt. This is the last slide before I do that, but it is all around how you procure Azure through CSP, because you say Azure, but Azure can kind of cover a variety of different things, and this is incredibly high level, so I don't mean to patronize, but you've effectively got consumption services, and these are the services sold on a consumption basis. They're kind of billed per hour, per transaction basis. These are your workloads and your virtual machines kind of running within Azure. And again, when those virtual machines are running, you're only paying for when it's actually consuming the service. And those are the consumption services, the virtual machines. And that's, what most people refer to when we're talking about Azure. You also got the Azure productivity plans. I call them the productivity plans. So you may be known as something else, might not be completely on brand there, but these are basically the monthly Azure user plans. So Azure Active Directory Premium Plan 1, Plan 2 for your multi-factor authentication, for your conditional access. So this is almost within that. I call it the productivity plans because it almost aligns more to the Office 365 style of licensing. So, per user, build in arrears, Azure Active Directory Premium and such like. And then finally, there's the marketplace with, for example, such as Ultimate's product, Autonomous Cloud, but also, Wowzer Stream Edge, and, the Microsoft marketplace where you can go on and obviously kind of consume that directly. But I did want to really focus on what Ultima are doing in this space, and I am going to hand over to my colleague Matt, who's going to talk through a little bit more around what our kind of bolt-on add-on services are around those Azure consumption services. What kind of comes with it from Ultima, and then what we're doing to add some extra value.
Cool, thank you very much, Ian. So kind of leading on from where Ian was there. So what we're going to talk about initially is IA Cloud Essentials. So IA Cloud Essentials comes with the CSP agreement that we were just talking about, so plenty of value adding there. And actually, this is kind of above and beyond what anyone else in the marketplace is doing. But first off, to kind of set the scene, what I'm going to do is actually go, okay, why have we created this? Why have we actually gone and built this tool? There's kind of two big things that come out of using the public cloud. So we're talking about Azure in this case. We're not talking about the kind of Office 365 suite. But there is a big amount of wastage in the public cloud. Those of you who are using Azure, you're probably not necessarily willing to admit it, but you know that it's never quite as lean as it could be when you're out in the public cloud. You might have just moved some machines out there. Actually, there's some trimming down to be done, but you don't really have the stats, etc., to do it. And actually, the way in which you manage it is very different. Kind of on the flip side of that, it's also the management piece. So obviously we've talked about the licensing perspective. We want to make sure obviously that cost of the actual consumption is as low as possible. But actually when you're out in the public cloud, there's also a cost of the human resources, being very honest about it. And also at the end of the day, it's your time that you spend managing that as your environment. There's nearly 50% of businesses that have little to no automation in the public cloud. All that does is it ends up meaning there's a lot of manual effort that goes into managing the public cloud, which kind of seems a bit contrary to what you're trying to achieve when you go out there. The point of the public cloud is it's a much more scalable, much more automatable platform. If you're not leveraging that, you're kind of not really getting the true value. So IA Cloud Essentials allows you to do kind of a few different things. So you've got reduction of cost. So we have a cost optimization engine that sits within here. So this augments what you get from the CSP agreement that Ian was just talking about. So we're now looking at the specific resources themselves. How can we actually manage those resources? So not just from a licensing perspective of how can we reharvest licenses, because that's very important, but also how can we actually optimize the platform in itself? We reduce the amount of time that is needed in order to be able to manage that public cloud environment. So we will automate documentation, we automate onboarding into monitoring services. Those kind of things is where we want to be able to help as part of that. At the end of the day, what that allows is an increase of focus for you to manage the application layer, because what you're actually is important to your business is that application layer. The actual platform itself doesn't provide a massive amount of value to your business. It's the application layer that sits on top of it and be able to use that most effectively. So talking about that tooling, so we have cloud native monitoring for infrastructure as a service. So this is those virtual machines, etc. We do automated dependency mapping of services. So if you need to go and troubleshoot, work out what's talking to what, or in some cases, what isn't talking to what when it should be, that's all provided as part of it. Zero touch documentation across those IaaS services. So you fully document that environment, being able to get you a nice point in time to go, okay, here is a solid benchmark that we know where everything is. There's also automated cost saving tooling as well that sits within here. So we're trying to keep this nice and simple, then easy to use tools as well. So just to kind of go through that. So as part of this, you do get an additional Azure dashboard. So those of you who are familiar with Azure probably know the Azure dashboards are not as wonderful as they could be sometimes. So what we've done is there's an automated dashboard that comes into your environment, automatically onboards all those machines into it, so you get to see it. So it covers stuff like the disk space use, CPU utilization, memory utilization, kind of those high level stats that are really important for you to be able to see. Does it over a 24-hour period, so you can see those spikes if they're happening within your environment. There's also a separate dashboard that we have, so that is the IA Cloud dashboard. So this is where we do those cost saving. That's also where you find your documentation as part of it. As you can see here, it is really simple to do. Within each one of those sections that you can see there, so it's orphaned IP addresses and orphaned disks, where it is to require attention, you can click into there, gives you insight into, okay, these are the resources that are orphaned, we can go and address them, and at the end of the day, immediately save money. It does only take 10 minutes to get up and running with this. So we do installs with customers all the time. I actually had one later on today with a customer, and it's literally 10 minutes end to end to get this up and running. As I said, there is no cost associated with this. So if you have a CSP agreement with us, or you're looking to move CSP agreement over to us, this is all done free of charge for you. So no cost from that side. Also doesn't require any Azure skills to get this up and running. So all it is a little executable file that installs. That allows us to create a link between the two tenants. And then beyond that, it's just a wizard-driven install from there. So super simple from there, as I mentioned around that Azure dashboarding. And this is only kind of the beginning of what we're trying to do. So there is the essentials piece, as I said, doesn't cost you anything, so nice and free from that side. Then we kind of go up into, okay, what are the actually kind of larger services? How do we do something a bit more comprehensive? So we have IA Cloud, which is a platform-based approach. So that's purely the software. If you still want to be fully in control of your environment, we have IA Cloud for that. So that's licensed on what we call a PRT, so that's virtual machines, SQL servers, etc. from that side. Then we have Autonomous Cloud. Autonomous Cloud is a full management service, and that's based on a percentage uplift for that. What we're going to do now is jump into Autonomous Cloud a little bit. Very high level, once again, we're not trying to go super deep on this. If you have any questions, more than happy to answer them, or if you'd like a follow-up conversation, equally more than happy to have that conversation from that side. So what does Autonomous Cloud do kind of above and beyond that essentials piece? So that essentials piece is a software platform, sits in your environment, and at the end of the day, you're managing that as your environment. However, when we've put Autonomous Cloud in for customers, we've actually seen incidents reduced by a pretty considerable amount. Because we're doing more than just looking and monitoring that environment, we're actually being proactive with this. So we're looking at how we automate backups, how we automate patching, how we automate antivirus enablement and keeping that up to date as well. So actually we're able to reduce the amount of incidents in that environment. Because we're proactively managing it, we also are capable of being changing the architecture and making sure that's actually architected to best practice as we go through it. If we look at actually what the kind of autonomous cloud platform has, so there's kind of 5 different areas of it. Cost management and optimization, we've talked a little bit about that in the IA Cloud Essentials piece, but actually we go above and beyond when we start talking about the autonomous cloud platform, because this is based on that IA Cloud platform I briefly touched on. The way in which we do this is actually there are now currently 19 different metrics we monitor this on. We've had customers who have come through on Autonomous Cloud. They've actually managed to reduce their spend in Azure by 40% just because of how we can optimize that environment. So quite a considerable cost saving from that side. We also do security and compliance as part of this. So I've mentioned that AV piece. There's also full security alerting as part of this. So that all gets integrated into our ITSM system. I'll get into in a second as part of that. We're also going to be doing CIS benchmarking as well for your environment. So we'll be able to go, okay, here is how far you are away from the CIS benchmark. Here is how we can kind of help you reach those benchmarks as part of it. Make sure your environment is compliant. Make sure the management is nice and centralized. So you still use Azure, you still have full access to it. Even though it's delivered as a service and a management service, you still have complete access. Last thing we want to do is remove any access to your environment. You have a support portal, so that we use ServiceNow for that. As I said, we'll get into that in a second. You have the IA Cloud portal to also have the ability to look into what's happening in your environment. So that's where we kind of create all of the visualization and reporting as part of that. So with the full complete service, so the Autonomous Cloud and IA Cloud, we do full environmental coverage. So we're not just covering IA services here, we're covering PaaS services as well. Those PaaS services are where it's massively growing, and also they're quite a challenge to actually manage. So this documentation for a reasonably sized environment, so let's say 10,000-ish pounds a month, give or take, which isn't a big environment by any stretch of the imagination, can run to 1,000 odd pages. We don't recommend you looking at the whole lot because it's quite extensive. We do provide an executive summary at the beginning, provides a RAG analysis, so you can kind of see where the key issues are. As I said, we use ServiceNow at the back end for this. So we are currently on the latest release of ServiceNow as part of this service. So you get access to the full kind of capabilities from that side. It is very heavily integrated from that side. So it is nice and it's very kind of seamless to be able to use. The actual alerting that you get, if you've ever integrated Azure alerting into any kind of ITSM tool, you'll know that it's kind of very code-based. It's not very kind of clear and concise in terms of what any of the issues are. What we're doing as part of this is actually we're cleaning that up. So it allows you to see what's happening in your environment much clearer. Kind of the last piece on the platform, because then we're going to get into the actual kind of service itself. So the actual platform does several things. So we do automate a load of the BAU tasks. We're obviously still there to be able to handle any exceptions as part of that, as part of the service, because that's quite important. But what we want to do is try and automate those tasks because it allows us to be more proactive to you with your environment. Actually provide recommendations, actually provide changes as part of it. Talk about cost and performance optimization, cloud native monitoring. So currently we monitor, I believe it's 37 different resources, if I'm not mistaken. And that's only expanding as we go through time. That documentation covers those same amount of resources as well. We didn't even touch this. There's software asset management. So we log everything that goes onto a machine. So from that side, if you need to be compliant, all that's included as part of it. There's also that single management portal for access across all of those services. When we talk around the actual service itself, we break it into 2 different sections. So there's what we call the core services, and there's optional kind of additional services that sit on top of it. So the base level is Autonomous Cloud Core. So this is designed to be effectively the platform automation piece. So we're not going in and remediating within OSs at this point. It's purely Azure platform management. So that's kind of where we come from there. You will get a copy of these slides at the end, or equally you can look through on the recording. So I won't read through absolutely everything on these slides. If you wanted us to be able to help remediate within the OS, be able to do backup remediation, patch remediation as part of that, actually monitor and support the operating system itself, we can also do that as part of it. That's basically just a bolt-on. So you can kind of pick and choose these as you want to do it. If you wanted to have service management, so this is problem escalation, major incident handling as part of that, an actual named service delivery manager that you have scheduled reviews with as well. So this is where we go through those recommendations that we have. We can start arranging changes within your environment because we have full change control as part of this. That's where that comes in. Kind of going above and beyond that, this is where we talk about those option packs. So We have the Active Directory pack, so if you want management for that Active Directory piece, you can do that. Database pack, firewall pack. With the new one that's coming out is the MDR pack, so this is managed detection and response. This is actually full security services. So if you want a full managed security service for Azure, that can be done as part of it. If you're using stuff like Citrix, RDS, WVD, etc., we can also do management for that as well. So trying to be kind of looking forward into, okay, where are the new services? Where can we help support you? So you can just focus on actually doing the application side from there. As I said, very high level. It's all I'm gonna say for now in terms of what we're doing here. And obviously, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them or reach out to me afterwards. And I'm more than happy to answer them. And hand back over to you, Ian.
Excellent stuff. Thanks, Matt. No, that's absolutely fantastic. And I was just effectively going to cover off really just some kind of final updates from Microsoft. So let me see if I can do this as seamlessly as Matt did it. Look at that, almost like I know what I'm doing. So I just wanted to cover off the final few, updates and recent news from Microsoft, which I do think is important to always track. And ultimately, this is to do with the licensing, and it's important to know that we are hearing news about a price increase coming on the 1st of July, 2021. Specifically, it is around Microsoft Intune, or their enterprise mobility and security E3 offering. But as you can see, we are kind of looking at a not insignificant price uplift there from around, Intune specifically around £5 to £7. So we are looking in the region of that kind of 15 to 20% price increase on that specific product. Now that does mean that there's an overall price increase on the enterprise mobility and security suite as well from the 1st of July 2021. Although please note, and again, while Microsoft doing this, please note that the price for Microsoft 365 E3, Microsoft 365 E3 includes EMS E3, by the way, but that is not having a price increase. So maybe some organizations who were looking at Microsoft 365 E3 and were saying, well, yeah, we're doing a few bits and pieces, but it's cheaper for us to buy the individual components, will now realize that it's just that much more expensive to buy the individual components, and therefore you should definitely be buying that larger suite. What I will say is that it doesn't really change the process. You still need to profile your user, find out what they are using, and if it is cheaper to buy the individual components, that's what you should do. If it's cheaper to buy the overall suite, then that's what you should do. If it is fairly close, then it's probably going to be a question of management and simplicity. New Office 2021. So again, a recent announcement that the new perpetual release is now available for review, or will be available for review in April 21. It's going to be the second half of this year that there's going to be that perpetual release of Office 2021, and we're expecting about a 10% increase with that. But interestingly, Microsoft have confirmed that there will be future releases too, future on-premise releases. So, you buy Office 365 E3, you are getting that local install copy of Office within that, or you can buy Office with software assurance, and this is basically what we're talking about here. It's also worth pointing out on that release framework, Windows Server 2021. Microsoft have announced 2022. So I've got my labeling wrong there. Apologies. So it is Windows Server 2022, and it is now in preview, and it will be available for release later this year. And I did want to make reference to the start of this webinar when we were talking about all of those other agreements and what's happening with them. We know that actually you can, in theory, still have open agreements and this, that, and the other. Open agreements are being retired from the 1st of July. We've already seen the same with Select Plus, and MPSA is going the same way. The CSP, Cloud Solution Provider, which we're also talking about today with Azure and Cloud, just so you're aware, you can buy perpetual licensing on the CSP. So even it's called a Cloud Solutions Provider Agreement, implying that it's only cloud, you can buy perpetual license on there because all the other frameworks, MPSA, Plus, Open, are being retired. So if you're kind of sitting there thinking, well, when am I going to buy my standalone version of Visio, then you will be able to do it on the CSP. But every customer's scenario is going to be unique, so your own kind of framework is going to kind of be pretty bespoke to yourself. So that pretty much runs through. Well, that's the end of the webinar. Like I say, quite a quick one today, just the half hour. It has been recorded. Slides will be made available. I have seen there haven't been any questions because we've just covered it off in such wonderful fashion, or perhaps it was so high level there was just too many questions to ask. So hopefully you can see my contact details there, or contact your account team. But please do contact us if you have any questions. Thank you very much for your time this morning.